Namaste and welcome back. Today, let's go deeper into this essential aspect of heartful communication, especially listening. I would like to talk about how we can develop empathy and be able to bring this loving approach into our listening, even in the most difficult situations. Last week, we saw the importance of being fully attentive, fully present in each interactions, no matter how short it may be. Even when we are simply saying good morning to someone, can we try to greet that person with our full presence, looking into their eyes with a smile and truly wishing them a good morning, rather than hastily saying, G morning. I receive some letters also, emails. They make these words so short sometimes, and when they write Daaji, they put down Daag for George. It's very short, Daaji it means, but they replace JI with G, and when you try to read for a bilingual or trilingual person, Daag means Daag in Hindi means darkness or some spots. So, without understanding, we somehow shorten our words or somehow unnecessarily exert ourselves and make it torturously wrong. Well, how would it be like when you speak automatically without much feeling in your heart? Why not try this week to get out of this fake nature of our inner self and expose loving nature? When we are quite inside, centered in our heart, able to retain our meditative condition, we can more easily be fully present. Plus, we gradually develop poise, and this enables us to be in the midst of all kinds of turbulence without being thrown off balance. Poise is an interesting word and a condition. If you look it up in dictionaries, you will see some associated words like equilibrium, steadiness, presence, and grace. Graceful means full of grace. Poise can be like that soft radiance emanating from the absolute, from the source. I remember when I lived in New York, I would meditate every morning. And after breakfast, drive to the pharmacy. On the way, I would consciously try to dive deeper on the condition created during meditation every morning. Gradually, I found that this inner condition was spreading around me. When you're so focused with your inner condition, somehow it finds its way to percolate outside. Some sort of an osmosis gets established. It seemed to diffuse its fragrance all around, and even when I shook hands with someone receiving prescriptions from a patient, I found an effect of peacefulness seemed to be created in them, see. And often I would also, with a conscious mind, look in their eyes, transmit love with my heart, shake their hands, transmit that softness. So we can try making a specific silent intention or suggestion that it should be like this. You can have this attitude in which I would wish you write it down in your notes, that this prayerful meditative state that I am having is within me, is also outside me. Pervading around me is absorbed in this state. When I look at people or talk to them or listen to them or I'm just silent, let this inner meditative condition spread everywhere. You may be free, not doing much in the office at some moment, maybe for 5 minutes. Also use those 5 minutes in reinforcing this idea that everything surrounding me is absorbed in godly remembrance. That will also shift your inner condition, you see. It will make you even more soft and centered and poised. When we develop a habit of becoming quiet and listening attentively, we realize that this listening is a golden key in arguments or conflict. Listening is a golden key in any argument or any conflict situation. It can diffuse an angry situation remarkably, rather very quickly. Anger simply tells us that there is something that really matters to that person. In other words, that they have needs, and those needs are probably not being fulfilled. And that's how they express unfulfilled expectations. So, in the face of anger, it is helpful to take a pause. By intentionally creating this space, we give ourselves the possibility of responding in a choiceful way. Instead of having a knee-jerk reaction and you just react and shout and scream. You know, Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, wrote in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's a brilliant book. I quote, "There is a space between the stimulus and the response. In this space, we have the choice of our response, and in this choice lies our evolution and our freedom." Freedom from unhelpful, habitual ways of interacting. We may not be able to control events, but what we can control is how we respond to them. Meditation, it helps us. It helps us to develop alertness, to become more aware, to become more sensitive, to be able to make this space between the trigger that is coming from outside and the response that comes from within. In heartful communication training, we suggest that instead of getting furious, often we get furious when we are responding. Let us try to become more curious instead. You will enjoy this furiousness versus curiousness state of mind. We can be curious, interested in what unfulfilled needs might be there in the other person. That's the main cause of anger or criticism. For example, one of our trainers shared an experience about her meeting with an angry staff when her family business had been impacted very badly due to this COVID pandemic. Sales had hit rock bottom and they had to slash the salary of all the staff members. The staff were very upset about their salary cut, and she, being a director, decided to meet them. The moment she entered the room, she could feel that the energy was very hostile. She paused, centered herself in her heart, offered a silent prayer from within, and sat down. First thing she did was to ask how they were all feeling. After a little bit of nudging and attentively, quietly listening to them, she found that they began to open up. As each individual began sharing their problems, it soon became clear to all of them that everyone was harboring similar anxious, resentful feelings because they were in need of clarity and security. Soon, as more and more people shared their distress, they discovered that they were all in the same boat. In that moment, what they most needed was empathy, to be understood for what they were going through. And as she offered them this empathy, feeling what it was like to be in their situation, gradually the hostility transformed to togetherness and calmness. She reports that there was truly a feeling of we are one, and the only way we will be able to sail through this situation in the business is when we keep the boat steady by holding each other's hands. She said that it ended up being one of the lightest, most positive meetings she ever had with the team. Then together they came up with the ideas of how the business could adapt to the difficult situation. So you see, empathy first, solution last, and it will emerge. We humans are actually wired for empathy, for connection. In our brains are what's called mirror neurons that fire when we see or hear someone going through a particular experience. And this enables us to feel the person, identify with the person. If you like to venture into the deeper meanings of these mirror neurons, I wish you Google. You'll really appreciate the value of understanding mirror neurons. Without empathy, communication would be mechanical and superficial. Our hearts would be left out in the cold, so to say. It's really important to remember that empathy does not mean agreement. Let me repeat. Empathy is not agreement. We can empathize with someone with whom we disagree or whose behavior we don't enjoy. Marshall Rosenberg, in his book, tells how one woman actually saved her own life by being able to empathize with the man who attacked her. It's one of the reasons why parents find it hard to empathize with their children, because they imagine that showing child that they understand her or him when the child is doing something they don't like is like agreeing with them, or that you are okay if they continue doing wrong. No, it's not. If the child feels they are being understood for their feelings and needs first, you have a much better chance of finding ways how to move forward together and maintaining boundaries or guiding them towards inculcating good moral values. We can all benefit from giving ourselves some empathy at times. Pause. Pause whenever you are disturbed, even if it's just for a minute, or try to go quietly within and connect softly with your heart. This listening with ears has a lot to do with the poise in your heart. Self-empathy is not the same as comforting ourselves or trying to magic the disturbance away. No, self-empathy means that we accompany ourselves honestly, accepting our feelings and needs. By the way, animals also feel and have a capacity for empathy. You may have observed this, for example, in your pet dog. What would that dog do when you're upset? It would sit beside you quietly, won't demand to go outside. We don't have to think of empathy only being for situations where someone is needing to talk. What about everyday empathy when it might take only a minute to make a big difference to someone's day? I heard a story from a guy who was in a cafeteria in one of our ashrams. He was at the end of the queue for dosas. The line was long and people were impatient with the length of time they needed to wait. There was only one person cooking the dosas. He was very hot and stressed as he struggled to make dosa after dosa quickly so that he could serve such a big numbers of people. He used to throw the batter onto the pan and tossing the dosas on the plate angrily. His face was in frown, and at one point he shouted at a boy who complained that his dosa was not properly cooked. Well, when it was our guy's turn to be served, he began by offering empathy to the dosa maker. He said, and I quote, "I guess it's really tough to cook and serve so many people and be alone doing it. It sure would be good if you had someone else to help you, wouldn't it?" Unquote. He stopped and sighed and wiped his sweating forehead and said, "Wow, who else would do this job? People don't like to work in this heat." Unquote. Our guide said, "Yes, I can see you are really hot and tired. You could do with a break, couldn't you? You certainly deserve it." Now, this such a statement, the cook's tensed up shoulders relaxed. He nodded and actually smiled. During the next 20 minutes that the guy was in the canteen, he noticed the cook was different. He was calm, sometimes smiling, and not tossing the dosas roughly onto the plates. It took so little, just a few moments of connecting, of empathy, of appreciating what it was like for him in that moment, to make a difference. Any of us can do this at any time, with anyone, provided we are alert and timely. Okay, so here are some simple practices for this coming week. Practice being fully present in listening, pausing whenever you are triggered. And let me repeat that. Practice being fully present in listening, pausing whenever you are triggered. Next exercise will be, let's be willing to feel into other people's worlds and empathize with them. See how they're feeling. And please try what I mentioned earlier of making an inner suggestion that everything around you is absorbed in godly remembrance or in the divine state. In our next session, we will be looking at how we can speak with love.